watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
There are many men and women on the Jewish scene today who are doing exciting, creative, innovative things for the benefit of everyone on earth. And one of them is my very special guest, Michael Granoff, founder of Maniv Energy, which he created in 2005 to explore opportunities in the all-important field of alternative energy. And through professional work in Israel, he is one of those who has helped create Israel's reputation now as the startup nation. Michael is a graduate of Tufts University with 2 advanced degrees, one in law and one in business, both from Northwestern University. And Michael is also a deeply committed Jew and is extremely active in Hillel, the Foundation for Jewish Campus Life, and in AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And I had the pleasure of meeting Michael Granoff at the America-Israel Friendship League dinner. You might have seen it on Shalom TV, where he accepted an award on behalf of Shai Agassi, who's created Better Place, an amazing electric car company in Israel. And Michael, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
There's so much I want to find out about how you become you, but I want to do first the business itself. Why alternative energy? How, you have a law degree, you have a business degree. Michael, how did that come about that you're interested in that field?
Well, I've always kind of had one foot in business, one foot in the political world. And they came together about 10 years ago in the wake of the Second Intifada, the terror war in Israel, and 9/11. I got very interested in national security issues, which led to an interest in what has become known as energy security. And the first thing I do is help a buddy of mine in Washington named Robbie Diamond, who is a fantastically talented individual. He created an organization called Securing America's Future Energy, the objective of which was to take the energy debate out of the domain of the environmentalists, where it had been pretty much exclusively placed, and to put the focus on national security by bringing in retired military officials, and one of them, a person I've had grown tremendous affection for, General P.X. Kelly, who was commander of the Marines under President Reagan, and business people, and the most prominent of those is Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx. And that organization had a lot of success, actually, in getting President Bush, the oil president, to sign increased fuel economy standards, but it also taught me along the way that, to my conclusion by about 2006, that electrification of transportation was an inevitability, and that's really what led me down the path to a better place.
Has the electrification happened at as fast a rate as you expected?
Well, currently in the United States, there is what I would say a temporary backlash against the electric car industry.
Backlash against it?
Yes, and it's actually for a lot of the very reasons that Better Place was created. The 2 big knocks against the cars are that they are too expensive and that they are inconvenient because they don't go far enough on a charge. Those are precisely the 2 fundamental challenges that Better Place set out to solve by actually creating a less expensive and a limitless range car. And the way we do that is by separating out the battery from the rest of the car. You take the battery away, you take the premium away. It's now no longer a big premium priced car. Instead, today it's at parity. In the future, it'll actually be at a discount to gas cars, a pretty significant discount, because what you're really talking about is a consumer electronic device. It's like a plasma TV. And when produced in volume at scale, price will come down. And we solved the range issue by putting a network that includes the ability to switch your battery robotically in just a couple of minutes. And in fact, by sometime this spring, you'll be able to drive from the very north of Israel to a lot just switching batteries using no gasoline, no oil product at all.
Okay, help me understand. First of all, you said you were going to create a car without a battery?
It's a switchable battery.
What's that mean?
That means that the $10,000, $12,000 battery that you would have to buy today if you bought an electric car here in the U.S., you don't actually have to buy when you buy a Better Place car. Renault, which is the French automaker, has been a fantastic partner for us, has created a 5-passenger luxury sedan that I'd say is comparable to a Camry. And in Israel today, it's priced at about the price of a Toyota Corolla because it comes without the purchaser of the car buying the battery. Instead, what you buy is a subscription to Better Place. So you pay a monthly fee for the miles that you drive. And that monthly fee, if you're driving more than 12,000 miles a year, that monthly fee is a 20% discount to today's gasoline price, and you could lock it in for a 4-year contract. So oil could go to $200, $300 a barrel, and it doesn't matter, you're paying the same monthly fee.
How do you generate the batteries that you need to produce so much energy for the cars that these batteries are going to go into?
Well, batteries are an energy storage device, and today they're very expensive. They're coming down in price over time, and that's why our business.
Do you create the batteries? Do you manufacture the batteries?
No.
Okay. You get them from somewhere.
We buy the batteries.
Okay.
If you think about it this way, 100 years ago, if you were to go into a business, you might have thought to go into the business of building gas stations, or you might have thought to go into the business of building cars. But it turns out, if you had actually decided to go into the business of digging holes and getting the oil out of it, that was the business that over the last 100 years was the most profitable. So what we're effectively doing is taking the place of the oil companies. Instead of drilling holes and finding oil and refining the oil and bringing it to market, we're actually buying the batteries, which we think are what's going to finally break the 100-year monopoly that oil has had on global transportation.
Okay, I want to get back to that in a minute, but just finish on the car.
Yeah.
You say that somehow I'm driving from the north of Israel to the south of Israel. I'm coming from Tzfat to Tel Aviv, and I need to switch batteries. Do I have to get out of the car to switch the battery?
It's like going through a car wash. It takes about 4 or 5 minutes. You put your tires right in the guide rails, and the robot takes over, and you get a little.
And on my way from Tzfat to Tel Aviv, where do I find these guide rails?
Well, we'll have 40 stations operational by the middle of this year.
Okay, so instead of pulling into a classical gas station,
right,
I go into a recharge station of some sort.
I'll tell you, it's a pleasure. Every morning I wake up to a handful of emails from friends who just happen to be driving around Israel and see one of our construction sites. We have 35 foundations at least, and in some cases much more, already built out on this network. And yes, indeed, the 40 stations will enable you to drive anywhere in Israel.
How have the Israeli people taken to the electric car?
Well, it's still early, and in fact, just last week.
How early is it, Michael?
Just last week, we had a big milestone. I should say 4 years ago last week, January 21st, 2008, we were honored to be the guests of both the President and the Prime Minister of Israel, at which both made the pledge that Israel should break its dependence on oil for transportation by 2020. And we said it would take 4 years to get this network to the point where we could put cars on the road. And in fact, 4 years and 1 day, because the 21st this year was a Shabbat. On the 22nd of January, we put the first 100 cars on the road. They went in a caravan from our offices in Rosh Hashanah through Tel Aviv in the central part of the country. Very thrilling. And so right now, we're in the final stages of testing. These are cars that are all bought and purchased, but by our employees and friends and family. And within just a couple of months, the general public will be able to. We already have several of the leasing companies on board, and we have several hundred of the large fleets in Israel representing tens of thousands of vehicles. It will take time before we can put all those vehicles on the road, but the interest and the enthusiasm is really spectacular.
And you hope to do this over a 4-year period?
Well, we'll do it over the next several years. This year, we'll have some number of thousands of cars, and we think we'll go up from there, and we'll see just how big the market is.
And again, just let me understand more. What about power? I hear people in America always worry that electric cars won't have the power of the gasoline engine car.
This is a misconception that's very easy to correct. We have a visitor center in the north of Tel Aviv at Pigley Lot, where the oil used to be stored for Israel. And we've had 100,000 people now through that visitor center, including 11 U.S. governors and many, many members of Congress. In fact, Jack Lew, now the chief of staff of the White House in his prior role, was one of the first people who came through and made his own video on YouTube. I was honored a few weeks ago to host the American ambassador, Dan Shapiro, there, who also put a video up on YouTube that you can go and see. But the point is that these 100,000 people that have come and have driven this car understand that it is not only not a sacrifice in power and in acceleration, but actually it's a much better driving experience than a gasoline car.
Interesting. You know, by the way, Israel has a horrible driving reputation.
Well, we're not doing anything to change the mindset of Israeli drivers.
Okay.
Right now.
So now talk to me, why Israel, and what's been the reaction in the United States? And you told me off camera, you don't watch that much television, but I don't know if you saw. My sense is it aired many times during the recent football season. There was a commercial for an electric car where a father and a son pull into a gas station, and the car is electric, and therefore, why is he going to the gas station? And the son keeps saying, because you want to go to the bathroom, right? You want to go to the bathroom, right?
Yeah.
And in America, there is almost like a reluctance to embrace the electric car.
Well, it's actually very interesting. I mean, why Israel? There are a number of reasons, but they may not be the reasons that people traditionally think. The biggest reason, to be honest, is the price of gasoline. We are competing directly against gasoline, and we're doing something that is a very capital-intensive business. It means we have to raise a lot of money, and in fact, we've raised, in the private sector, $750 million, which I believe is more than any company ever raised before they got to revenue stage. And as a result, we need to get a return on that investment. And you get the biggest return where gasoline costs the most. And that's why we're not only in Israel, but we're in Denmark, we're in Australia, we're in places where gas costs more than the U.S. Not just that it's small. The fact that it's small means that we can say we're opening up at the full country level, which is what we're doing in Israel and in Denmark. In Australia, it will be on a metropolitan area level to begin with, and ultimately in the United States, that's what the strategy likely would be. But the commercial you were referring to regards the Chevy Volt, which has done some positive things and created some misconceptions around the industry, because that's a car that I actually bought for my mom. It's a very well done car. It's probably priced higher than the appetite of most Americans, but it gives you fully charged about 40 miles of electric drive without any gasoline, but then gives you the ability to continue your trip by using a gasoline engine to charge the battery, so that you don't have what's referred to as range anxiety. I'll tell you, the last 2.5 years I've been driving an electric car in the New York metropolitan area without a range extension, without any gasoline at all, and I haven't found that range anxiety is so much of an issue.
So now let's talk about the political issue that's underpinning this entire endeavor. There are many people who argue, Michael, something like this. The world is held hostage not simply to Arab countries that have been fortunate enough to have oil reserves in their territories, but to the oil companies, the giant international corporations, which want very much to hold on to their seat of economic power, and that anything that challenges the oil companies ultimately has an enormous fight on its hands, and that the lobbyists who pressure, for example, American legislation, are all working on behalf of the oil industry. And that therefore, we have heard, I've heard almost as long as I've heard Jewish education is what's needed in the Jewish community, I've heard America should develop oil independence, but energy independence, but we haven't, Michael. So I want you to talk about what you view as realistic in this battle that America in particular and the world in general is fighting when you're taking on what may be the most powerful corporate structure in the world?
It's a very complicated question. But what's important to understand is this. Gasoline at the pump is globally a $2 trillion a year business.
$2 trillion.
So there is obviously a lot of interest at stake in it. But what's also important to understand is that Exxon, which until Apple recently eclipsed it, was the world's highest market cap company, Exxon and the other private oil companies represent about 10% of global oil reserves. About 90% global oil reserves represented by states, by state actors, by Saudi Arabia, by Iran, by Venezuela and Russia and the like. And one thing that it's disappointed me to see many people in the Jewish community misunderstand actually, is that those countries in the Middle East will always be the swing producers on oil, which is to say that even if you go and drill, as I actually believe you should, and this is controversial in some facts, but I think the U.S. should exploit all of its own domestic resources. But the more you do that, you help the trade balance, you're importing less oil, but you're not actually changing the geopolitics at all. And the beneficiaries ultimately are those who have the cheapest oil, the easiest, easily accessible oil, which is effectively the Saudis and the Iranians. And you're actually also doing the same thing if you're encouraging an alternative liquid fuel industry. You're actually just prolonging the monopoly of liquids into transportation, which is the crux of the issue. On the other hand, we actually think that not only is electrification the right thing to do on the geopolitical angle and the right thing to do on the environmental angle, which we could go into if there's interest, but economically it is in inevitability. It is effectively the digitization of transportation, just as we've seen digitization sweep all the other industries. And in fact, these changes happen much quicker than people think. They happen disruptively, and they don't happen for ideological reasons. They happen because of economics. I often say about hybrids in the U.S., hybrids in the U.S. are kind of like Jews. It's about 2% market share, but if you live in New York or California, you think there's a lot more of them. Right? But why have hybrids only gotten 2%? They've had more than a decade. Why do they get stuck at 2%? The reason is you're asking people to pay a premium for a cleaner car, for a car that uses less oil. It's not a premium that, in most instances, they're going to recover over time. It's a premium they're paying for other reasons, for ideological reasons.
Correct.
That's an ideological purchase. If you want to actually impact the macro factors here, you have to get to the 98% that are buying on value. And that's what the Better Place model is attempting to do.
The electric car, you believe, will do that?
I believe the electric car will do that if it's done correctly. And we think that correctly means separating the ownership of the battery out and making the battery switchable so that that asset is not a barrier for the consumer who is looking to purchase the car, for a person worried about the obsolescence of the battery, worried about the residual value of the car with a used battery in it. All these issues are taken off the table when the battery is separated out from the car.
You explain it so well, I want to push you just one more moment. I didn't hear you talk about how angry you're going to make the Exxons and the Mobils, and why aren't you afraid they're going to come after you?
I don't view ExxonMobil and the private oil companies that have the 10% of the oil in the world. I don't view them negatively at all, to be honest. These are the companies that have paid dividends to our grandparents for ages, and these are the companies that have given Americans jobs. And I believe that these companies, first of all, it's this transition, although I think it will be disruptive when it comes to cars, it's going to take a long time, and it's going to be a big oil business for a very, very long time into the future. But second of all, I think these companies will and increasingly are seeing themselves as in the business of transportation, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are collaborators or even competitors with us in the future.
Okay, oil doesn't simply run cars. The way it's explained to us in general is oil runs everything.
Yep.
That basically it is the engine of energy in general. Is that wrong?
Oh, it is wrong unless you're speaking narrowly about transportation. In transportation, oil has had a virtual monopoly for a century.
How about lights?
No.
Electricity?
Globally, oil represents less than 2% of electricity production in the U.S. It's less than 1% with only a couple of regional exceptions. No, in fact, electricity is generated primarily from coal, from natural gas, and from hydro and other renewable forms. But as oil has become more scarce and more has been required in transportation globally, it has been discovered that there are more economic ways to run electricity, to run a lot of industrial uses, and we will see the same thing now begin to happen in transportation as electrification becomes a reality.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that you were involved in political work, and I know that you were involved in one of Al Gore's campaigns, correct?
Well, I was first involved in the 1992 Bill Clinton campaign. I had actually come to admire Governor Clinton as a high school student. That's tell you a little bit about kind of nerdish high school student I was.
Where were you in high school?
Not far from here at Dwight Englewood in Englewood, New Jersey. But and when he ran for president the first time, 1992, I was the associate national Jewish coordinator at the campaign. I didn't go into the administration, and I wasn't terribly active during the 90s, but I did actually become fairly friendly with Senator Lieberman. And in fact, also Vice President Gore at the time in other ways. But after Senator Lieberman was selected as vice presidential nominee in 2000, I got very active in the campaign. And then in the years thereafter, stayed very involved in the political life of Senator Lieberman.
Okay. Senator Lieberman has had his own interesting journey, and now is an independent who is retiring. Does that reflect a change in your own philosophy?
Well, I'll tell you. I often say in talking about Better Place that part of the problem as I see it is that in American politics today you have to either believe that there is an imminent jihadist threat or that there is an imminent threat from climate change. But if you actually believe both those things, there's only one person in Congress who you can support, is Senator Lieberman, who's obviously been on the forefront of the war on terror issues, but also on the forefront of issues around climate, which, despite the fact that it is politically as out of vogue as could be today, I believe is an issue that we need to address globally, and that actually failing to address is not only detrimental environmentally, but ultimately economically, because it's the more efficient and it's the innovative ways of doing things that will define the economy going forward. Some have said that even if you didn't believe in global warming, you would actually want to do things like electrify transportation and diversify away from oil and coal and so forth. And so, there are not too many people, I would say, with the political courage to be able to hold both thoughts in their head at the same time.
Okay. We recently heard President Obama give his State of the Union address. He talks about oil. He doesn't talk about electric energy.
Oh, he set a goal during the campaign, which he reiterated several times in his first couple of years in office, to have 1 million plug-in cars in the United States by 2015. I sometimes teased people in the administration by saying that their goal was to have 249 million gas cars by 2015. But, the administration has had the right idea, and I don't think has always made the right specific decisions. But I think there was a very frantic period around the election and the transition and the Recovery Act, and that I wish some things had been done differently. But I've talked to a lot of Republicans, and in fact, I recently had the opportunity to sit with several members of the Tea Party in Congress in Israel, and to say to them that on the issue of electric cars, that it actually is a fallacy that this issue should be a Democrat, pro-government issue. In fact, the reasons why you want to diversify away from the oil monopoly are national security, our trade balance, half of which is importing oil. That's $1 billion a day out of the U.S. economy. Every single day that we send $1 billion that could go, and by the way, used to go, to our local economy, out of the economy. And I think that is one of the reasons for the slow job growth that we see today. And it's not international competitiveness. We're seeing China actually take a big lead. We opened a visitor center like the one in Tel Aviv in Guangzhou, China, last month in December. And I think for those issues, for national security, for international competitiveness, and for trade balance, these are Republican issues, and that's why I think this should be a totally bipartisan issue.
Michael, you make such a compelling case. Why isn't your voice being echoed throughout the political scene?
Well, at the moment, like I said, we're in a bit of a backlash on the electric car stuff, and part of that is because I think that the approach that's being taken is asking people to pay a big premium for the cars, which it turns out not a lot of people are willing to do.
But you have a way of getting around that.
Yes. And so why aren't why isn't Better Place more active in the U.S.? And you go back to where I was before, which is that with the private investor money that we have to have a fiduciary duty to get the highest return, and we get that return in places where gasoline is actually priced. Where
yes,
I would
but
say
almost as a public service, you should be funded or
So-
in some way subsidized here in the United States.
I wouldn't disagree with that. But what I would say is that the number, in terms of the capital investment to set the network, which we would then be thrilled to operate in the United States, that number is a very small number compared to the oil industry today. In fact, it's about 1 week's worth of what Americans pay for gasoline. But it's a very big number for a startup company that's raising money in very difficult private capital markets.
And Michael, forgive me, can you explain how your work connects with that of Shai Agassi?
Well, Shai Agassi is the founder and CEO of Better Place.
Yes.
We were introduced in 2007 by President Perez, actually. And through that period of time, I did what was my business at that point, was help raise money for the company. When we finished raising the money at the end of 2007, the honest truth is that I was so obsessed with the vision and obsessed with the fact that we had this solution that I had a hard time continuing to look at things outside of it, and as a result have put most of my time over the last 4 years into Better Place.
Okay. How does this, in your mind, play into the notion that we have been introduced to of Israel as a quintessential startup nation?
Well, so much has been said and so well written by my good friends Saul Singer and Dan Senor on this topic that I don't know how much I can add. But part of it is clearly something that is deeply cultural about Israel. And I think it actually is another reason why it's a terrific place for us to try a radical new approach to cars as we're doing there. There are many people that I know, actually, as well as our economics work, when you're driving a lot of miles and using a lot of gasoline, if you're not driving that much, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to sign a contract with us to buy miles. And I know a lot of people in that category who nonetheless want to get into it because they're early adopters, because they want to try new technologies, because they want to see a new way of doing things. And it's that whole
That's the
attitude
Israeli mentality.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right.
And just so our audience understands, you have a home in New Jersey, but you spend a good period of time in Israel each year.
Yeah, I'm in Israel every 5 or 6 weeks, and then for the last several summers, we've been able to spend most of the summer there.
And your family is? Who's your family? You have a wife? Mm-hmm. Any children?
4 children.
They go with you?
Yeah, they go with me in the summer, not on the monthly trips.
And they love it?
Absolutely.
Where do you live in Israel? What part of Israel?
I'm very lucky that in the last several summers we've been able to switch homes with neighbors of ours from New Jersey who had moved to Ra'anana. And,
that's lovely.
Ra'anana is almost the heart of where Better Place comes from. It's where Shai Agassi grew up, and several other prominent people in the company also come from Ra'anana.
You're an Orthodox Jew. Did you grow up as an Orthodox Jew?
No.
What happened? How did that happen? What kind of home did you grow up in? And then how do you ultimately become comfortable in the Orthodox community?
Well, I was lucky to grow up in a wonderful Jewish home in Bergen County in Saddle River, New Jersey.
Who were your parents?
Neighbor of Richard Nixon, Martin Perry Granoff. And it was a vibrant Jewish home, but not very often synagogue going, I would say.
So it's not that observant.
Right.
Did you have Shabbat at home?
When I was young, we had Friday night dinner fairly regularly.
Was your family affiliated at all?
Yeah, we were members of Temple Emmanuel under Rabbi Andre Unger, and I actually enjoyed going on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, hearing his sermons, and I'm very lucky that 2 of his children are actually neighbors of mine and members of our community in Englewood and Tenafly.
And just so we understand, which movement?
Conservative movement.
Conservative movement. So at some point in your life, though, you are open to engaging with the Orthodox community. How does that happen?
Well, the beginning of my college career coincided with really turned out to be the apex of the Soviet Jewry movement. Since I was always interested in politics, I was thrilled that I found a political outlet for my Jewish identity, and then to my shock and amazement, we won. That issue went away, and I had to find a new hook for my Jewish identity. And following my experience at Tufts in college, where I had a very strong influence from the Hillel there, I spent a year in Jerusalem studying at Mechon Pardes, which was a wonderful year, and came back to work on the Clinton campaign. At that juncture, decided to maintain Shomer Shabbat, and that was basically the turning point.
And when does your wife come into the picture, and how comfortable is she with this?
Well, my wife grew up Orthodox, so she's very comfortable.
Very nice. What's her name?
Tovit.
Tovit. Okay. As you, I mentioned in the intro, you're involved in Hillel. You're involved in AIPAC.
I was on the board of Hillel for several years, but that was some years ago. Right?
Okay. What about AIPAC?
AIPAC, everyone assumed in the 90s that I was involved in AIPAC, but because the Oslo process was ongoing and I was convinced that there was going to be peace and there wasn't going to be a need for an organization supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship, I didn't get involved until after the failure of Camp David convening in 2000, and subsequent to that, it was clear to me that our hopes for a near-term peace were not at hand, and in fact, it was going to be a very essential organization, and so it's been a real privilege to be involved with the professionals at AIPAC over the last decade.
Who are top-notch.
Absolutely.
When you look now at the American Jewish landscape, are you encouraged? Are you discouraged? What gives you hope and what gives you concerns?
Well, vis-a-vis U.S.-Israel relationship, I remain very encouraged because I think that there is a bipartisan consensus that's deep and genuine, committed to U.S.-Israel relations in all but the extremes, I would say, of both ideologies. In more generally speaking, it disappoints me, obviously, as so many people have expressed through this political season, to see the polarization that's going on, which, I think is probably an impact of a lot of things, including the dramatic shift in media and information that we've had over the last decade or two. But, I think still that most Americans are by and large moderate, by and large pragmatic, and don't resonate very well with some of the strident ideological positions that we see coming out of campaigns these days.
Mm-hmm. And now, what about looking at the community itself? When you look at Jewish life, whether it's my age, or your children's age, are there concerns about the well-being of American Jewry?
Yeah, of course there are concerns about it. I don't know that I have anything particularly novel to say about it. We all know that the cost of Jewish education is a crisis, and it is. There are demographic issues that are of concern. I think there aren't enough Jewish families being created. But something that I think passed more quietly than it should have was the milestone of the fact that Israel recently became the world's largest Jewish community. And I think, the destiny of the Jewish people is, in fact, in Israel, although I also think that the American Jewish community is going to play a continuingly important role in Jewish life and with vis-a-vis Israel.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that diaspora Jewry also has an authenticity of its own?
Of course, absolutely. I think that Jewish contributions to every diaspora, and America in particular, where obviously the Jewish community has had the ability to fully explore their talents, have been legendary and are recognized by almost all. And no reason that shouldn't continue.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that one of the seminal moments in your own Jewish life was when you went down on a very cold day, a very cold Sunday, and stood with 250,000 Jews protesting the enslavement of Soviet Jewry and demanding that Congress, about a mile away, would, in essence, rise up. Jackson Vanik and the whole movement. Sharansky was there, and you were there, and I was there. And that was a moment that you say was critical to you.
Well,
And that I want you to talk about that moment, and then I want you to talk to me about this plan you have, which is interesting, about another, in essence, trip to Washington. But talk to me about it.
well, I was in my first semester of college at Tufts, and I allowed someone to drag me along to a meeting in October, November of '87. That was happening 2 subway stops away at Harvard, where this gentleman who I had vaguely been aware of, Sharansky, was coming to meet with students, and I didn't know what the purpose of the meeting was, but it was quickly clear that the purpose was to generate enthusiasm for this march that was to coincide with President Gorbachev's first visit to the United States. And my first reaction was, well, that's a week before my first finals in college, and I'm not going to sit on a bus for 12 hours. But at the conclusion of the session with Natan Sharansky, I was the chairman of the Tufts organization that put 3 buses together to go to the march. Until...
By the way, take a moment. Do you remember the day?
December 6, 1987.
And as you recall it, what do you remember about it?
Well, I remember that there was certainly a purity to the cause. There was no ambiguity about the fact that immigration rights should be fundamental, that the ability to practice one's faith, to be a part of one's people, should be fundamental. And there was also something very moving about seeing all of the divisions in the community fade away for that moment, for that cause. And it's something that's certainly been lacking more recently.
There was a feeling of being with one large family as we stood, in the sort of in the shadow of the Capitol building. And again, do you remember how cold it was?
It was a cold day.
Oh boy, was it cold. And it didn't matter. And the spirit of everyone around us, and you stood the whole time. They did it very well, I thought. They had speakers set up and they had screens set up, but it was done very well. But what I remember so well, vividly, was, number one, the feeling among everyone that we were all together. Wiesel was there and Sharansky was there, and it was extraordinary. Okay, so that moment was important to you, and now bring it to the present.
Well, I think if you look back over the American Jewish community in the last 100 years, obviously so much has been said and written about the fact that politically there either wasn't the ability or the courage to be more bold during the 1940s, and that's one of the greatest tragedies in Jewish history. But one generation later, there was a different approach, and there was one that not only actually succeeded for the purposes of Jewish people, but by many historical accounts contributed in a very significant way to America's victory in the Cold War. And what's also come out of that movement that we don't think a lot about is all of the innovation that those liberated people have brought to us, and amongst them, I would say, is Better Place, where many Russian Israelis are employed, and another that is part of all of our lives, which is Google. And those are just 2 examples out of thousands that came out of the successful activism of the American Jewish communities in the 70s and 80s. And it's a lesson that I don't think we reflect on enough. I don't think we teach our children hardly at all, and that's something that a friend of mine, Daniel Eisenstadt, and I have been talking about recently with the hopes that we can use this 25th anniversary year of that march. And I might also add, this is the centennial year of Senator Scoop Jackson, who remarkably was truly a leader. He almost led the Jewish people more than the Jewish people led this effort. And with those things juxtaposing this year, we're hoping that we can do some things to begin to raise awareness of the cause and its importance.
Have you had the chance to get to know Natan Sharansky?
I have had actually the pleasure of having Shabbat lunch at his home in Jerusalem, and that was a remarkable experience for its non-remarkableness. Truly wonderful Jewish home.
You said something to me also that there are some children who don't understand what we went through in order to free Soviet Jewry, and for whom Natan Sharansky is not the icon that he is for us. So take one moment. What Sharansky mean to you, both in terms of his role in as a Jewish Soviet refusnik, and his role since becoming so integral to the State of Israel, and now as the chair of the Jewish Agency to Jewish Life today?
Well, I think his life story is just one of the most remarkable ones that we've seen in recent history, and is not appreciated enough in the Jewish community or beyond, which is, I hope, something that will change over time. But when you think of the courage of this person who and the self-sacrifice to actually refuse release from prison on false medical grounds, but to insist only on being freed for the fact that he had not committed any crime. And his courage, and you have to also speak about Avital, and having spent time with them and seeing that in essence she is a very private person, and the public spotlight is not where she is most comfortable, and yet she understood that she was the most potent symbol of the whole movement during a period of time that he was in prison, and she did what she had to do remarkably well in that period. And there are many accounts that it was her personal encounter with President Reagan that moved this issue to the front of his agenda with the Soviets. So, they're just two remarkable people who need to be better appreciated in the Jewish world and beyond.
You say it so beautifully, and I'm very glad you mentioned Avital, because not only it's bad enough that so many young people don't know or understand who Natan Sharansky is, but because Avital absolutely disappeared after he was freed, and you're right, she was the face until that day he walked across the bridge. People don't know about her either, and you were lucky enough to know her, and I am very lucky to know her, and she is one of the real heroines of modern Jewish life, 20th century moving into the 21st century. So I'm at a Birthright Israel celebration, and Michael Oren, who is now the ambassador for the State of Israel to the United States, speaks about what it was that motivated him, Michael. And he describes how when he was a young person, when he had his bar mitzvah ceremony, he had to read transliterated Hebrew. And now here he is, an Israeli who has served in the Israeli army, who has become a major historian in his own right, and is now serving the State of Israel as one of our leading Jewish diplomats. And he explains the journey he took. And he points out that when he was a young child, he had to deal with some anti-Semitism. He then talks about the Six-Day War and how his father brings down to the breakfast table the famous Life magazine cover of the gorgeous Israeli soldier carrying a captured Egyptian rifle as he walks across, trudges across, wades across a part of the Suez Canal. And the father, Michael says, his father kisses the picture of this Israeli boy, this soldier, and says to his son, I love this boy. He didn't mean in any disrespect to his own son. He just was saying to his son, I love these Israeli people and what this young man represents. And then Michael Oren talks about how the movement to save Soviet Jewry was such an important part of his life. Anti-Semitism, the Six-Day War, and the movement to save Soviet Jewry, that they influenced him in a way that ultimately took this boy who had read transliteration in his bar mitzvah to be where he is today. And his point was, not his point, my point to him is, and I'm asking now you, our kids do not have anti-Semitism. The Six-Day War is somewhere near the Civil War. The Soviet Jewry movement is over, and there's nothing like it now in the Jewish world. What is it, Michael, that you can suggest can be the alternative experience that somehow excites young Jews today the way the influences that Michael Oren described influenced him?
Well, unfortunately, bad things always have a way of creeping into history to create those situations. But my hope is that what it will be is Startup Nation. And what it will be is Israel as a laboratory to solve some of the world's biggest problems, a laboratory that can be contributed to by both Israelis and by diaspora Jews and by non-Jews. Saul Singer talks about the fact that innovation is so much helped by concentration, and that's one of the things that we've seen in the U.S. and Silicon Valley. So many regions have tried and failed to replicate what is in Silicon Valley. And what we really have in Greater Tel Aviv is another Silicon Valley that is really now globally acknowledged as such. And Saul Singer hopes that that can be the Silicon Valley for the rest of the world, that if you're European, you come east, and if you're Asian, you come west, and you come to the Greater Tel Aviv area to set up your startup company and to address some of the world's biggest problems, and to find the solutions through technology and through business models. And I hope that I'm seeing it inspire young people. I'm seeing it in the fact that I get asked to come to talk to young audiences all over the place, which I don't think is for my good looks. And I think it's because this story is very inspirational for people, and I hope that can serve the same catalytic cause for Jewish unity and identity that these other things did in previous times.
Amen v'amen. That was beautiful and wonderful. You're a very special person. I really didn't get to know you till you were kind enough to come here. But you are doing something incredible. You're part of this Startup Nation, and in many ways, you are what is going to be the best hope for the Jewish future. And it's been an honor to meet you. I hope you are always comfortable coming back here and letting me, put you not only alone, but with some people around this table to talk about Jewish life.
I'd love to do it.
You are fabulous. I
couldn't
wish
be
you
more convenient for me.
Called Tuva Hatzlachariu.
So I have to tell you the story since you mentioned Michael Oren. Before he was named ambassador, he was working on another book, which was hopefully he will finish in the future, about founding the state. So he called me up in the middle of that process, and he says, "Do you know this guy AJ?" And I said, "Do I know AJ?" I said, "Yeah, now I know AJ. How did I get to know AJ?" I don't know if you have recollection of this period, but I very clearly remember the dawn of the internet age, and I was in business school, and you say, look, type something in here, and you get like all the information in the world. So what's the first thing you put in is your name. So I put in my name, and at that time, the only response to the name Granoff was from the Harry Truman Library. It was an oral history of a guy named A.J. Granoff, and I read this oral history, and I just couldn't believe it, because this is the guy actually not only who accompanied Eddie Jacobson in his meetings to the Oval Office, but who was the guy who knew the history and knew the everything leading up to the creation of the state, and knew Harry Truman as well as Eddie Jacobson from their previous days, and really pushed on the issue. And I called my dad up and said, "You're not going to believe this is the guy, A.J. Granoff." And he says, "Yeah, I know about that." And I said, "You do?" He says, "Yeah, that's my father's first cousin. In fact, they were named after the same person. My grandfather was Abe. And this is also Abe, but he went by A.J."
Oh, I get chills.
Yeah. And so, and it was on the founding commission of Hillel in 1927 or something like that.
So in essence, the work you're doing is
a continuation.
A continuation, which is also how this Jewish thing works, isn't it? Anyway, it's been a pleasure, and you promised to come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I wish you all the best in the work you're doing and in the Jewish life you're creating. You are a very special person. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
And that was our meeting with Michael Granoff of Maniv Energy. I hope you enjoyed meeting him as I have. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to the ideas expressed by Michael Granoff. Please email me, write me, paste on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.